We are back with the I Still Believe in Cleveland podcast after a few trips to sunny weather. Drew took a trip down to Florida. Eric and I were in San Diego for a wedding. We thought, what better time than now to revisit those sunny memories and talk Indians baseball for the year of 2019. So the number one question that we're going to kick it off with is tied to one of our superstar players and is going to be one of the top questions for Indians fans as this season starts, and that is what is going on with Francisco Lindor. Drew, let's kick it off with you. What is going on with Francisco Lindor, and who's going to fill in if his injury continues?
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't come to any sort of fill-in, because there's not exactly a whole lot on the roster, on the 40-man roster, to get excited about. But from all indications, it's going to be close to if he's ready to go for opening day. There's probably no reason to rush him back, but we would like to see him certainly sooner rather than later, because the options behind him leave a lot to be desired. You have, on the one hand, you have Yu Chang, who's only 23 years old. He's only had 41 major league at bats. He's a 330 OBP guy in Columbus, which isn't terrible if you're talking about a bottom of the lineup player. I don't know what his defense is. I imagine he's okay. He's adequate, at least at the position. You have sort of career minor leaguer, utility infielder Eric Stamets, who's 27, been kicking around AAA for a couple of years now. He's had 99 at bats in his major league career. He's done okay. He's had a 342 on base percentage. Again, not terrible if you're talking about your bottom of the lineup type fill-in guys, but certainly not an answer there. One of the interesting things that happened, while we were on our little break here, is that the Indians went out and signed Hanley Ramirez, who at one point in time was a really good shortstop. But unless he can turn the clock back, 6 to 8 years to start the season, he's probably more of a DH. So I don't think they want to bring up Yu Chang if they don't have to. So I would probably look at maybe Eric Stamets starting. I don't think they care if he runs out of options, but I think they'd like to keep some of the options open for Chang, again, only being 23 years old. I don't think he's ready for the major leagues yet.
Eric, who you got? Who's going to be starting at shortstop?
I really hope it's Francisco Lindor, but at least the majority of the games, if he sits out a game or two or misses a week, I think they can get by. Another guy's name that I've come across in this past week watching part of a game is Ryan Flaherty. He's not going to be selling any tickets, but he's been a couple years from the Atlanta Braves. He's respectable. It's kind of, copy and paste what Drew's been saying, the other guys. Somebody you can stick at the bottom of the lineup, not completely embarrass you, but not somebody you're going to rely upon. The one thing the two main things you're going to miss is obviously the fielding and hitting, but the one thing that's really going to be lost when Lindor's out, hopefully it's not too long like we had said, is his fielding. He's just so fast and very rangy, and it's a very, very popular place where baseballs get hit, and I'm a little worried about whether it's Flaherty, Chang, Max Moroff, or Stamets, or Hanley Ramirez, for that matter. I'm just want to minimize those errors and minimize balls getting around the shortstop and runs.
Yeah, it's not exactly murderer's row on that depth chart after you get past number one.
Right.
Yeah, Lindor has started taking grounders in spring training, so hopefully he's going to be back soon here. I'm sure they're going to take it slow with the calf injury. You're always working your calf when you're out on that field. All right, let's move on to question number 2. And this is something that we had a lot of last year, and we'll see what the outlook will be this year, and that is all-stars. So last year we had Jose Ramirez, Michael Brantley, Francisco Lindor, Corey Kluber, Trevor Bauer, Yan Gomes. 2 of those players are gone. What do you guys think? Is it just going to be the 4 guys on the All-Star team? Do all 4 of them make it? Are we going to add someone else? Eric, how many All-Stars are we going to have next year?
I'm going to be a little pessimistic. I'm going to say 4, but I think it's going to be Lindor, Ramirez, either Bauer or Kluber. And then the optimist in me is going to say some guy under the radar that we weren't expecting. I'm hoping his heartwarming comeback story of Leonis Martin, but he's going to have to probably have a season of his life for that to happen. The game's going to be in Cleveland. Maybe they're going to get some support or some sympathy votes. I would like to think that Jason Kipnis will have a bounce back year. He hasn't had a terrible last 2 years, but he's been trending negatively the last 5 years. If, for some reason he can turn back the clock, there's a chance for him. But realistically, I would go probably around 3 guys.
3 guys. Drew, do you agree?
Yeah, Eric brings up an interesting point with the game being in Cleveland. I imagine they will do everything they can to have as many Indians, as you can get to make it, popular with the home, town fans. When I first put this together, I had it at 3. I had Jose Ramirez is the definite number 1 for me. You hope Lindor is back, is healthy, that this calf injury doesn't linger. Assuming it doesn't, I think he'll be there as well. I don't think he'll start, but I think he'll be on the squad. I think Ramirez is probably should be the starting third baseman. It depends with Machado out of the American League. He's certainly one of the best options at third base. And then I think one of the pitchers will make it. It's probably Kluber because everybody knows the name, but Trevor Bauer is a name that people are becoming very familiar with as well. Carrasco, it just depends on which one of them has the best year. It's certainly possible that all 4 make it. It's certainly possible that only one of those pitchers goes through. The sort of dark horse candidate that I'll give is Brad Hand. I think that the Indians could be in a lot of save situations because we can't score offense and because our pitching staff is so good. And that equates to, however you slice that up, that equates to, if you can get to the 9th inning, which I think they'll be able to a decent amount of the time, to a lot of close games. And if there's a lot of close games, your closer ends up with a lot of saves. And that's the only stat that people tend to look at when you're talking about some of these relief pitchers in terms of all-star votes. It's what shows up on their fantasy squads. It's what shows up in the box score. And the more people see that name, he might be somebody that ends up making the team.
Yeah, I like the idea of Brad Hand sneaking in there as a new Indian all-star appearance. I love Trevor Bauer. Just seems like he is ready for the season. He had the tweet talking about all of his training stats in the off season and just like how he's tracking the rotations on his ball and just how many hours he spent in the weight room. And
nothing new for him, man. He does it every year. I love it.
And he's working on a changeup, which is a pitch that he hasn't relied on heavily in the past. So pretty exciting times for Trevor Bauer, and could be a great season for him. But yeah, Jason Kipnis, he used to be an all-star, had a tough year last year before that, not one of his best. How are you guys feeling about Kipnis? Can he turn it around this year for the Indians? Drew, let's kick it off with you.
No. Short answer. When we say turn it around, like we're referring to the Kipnis of old that was an all-star type of a player that was top of the lineup. Which he might have to be for this Indians team, but he's not going to be the guy that hits 20 home runs and has a 450 on base percentage and drives in 100 runs. He's not that player anymore, and that's okay. He's still a good second baseman, and he's still somebody that you can rely upon. But if you're asking, does he become the on-base machine of old? I'm going to have to say no. He hasn't shown me that he is still that player. I put together some projections for him just looking at his last couple of years. I came up with about 15 home runs. I'm hoping for about a 325 on-base percentage. And I would like to see him get, somewhere between around 70 to 75 RBIs. I think that's a positive year at this point for him, and that's pretty much what you'd be looking for out of what should be a good option as like a number 7 hitter on a team. It's just unfortunately for the Indians, he's probably going to have to bat a little higher than that.
Yeah, Terry Francona has already spoken out about Kipnis starting at second. Eric, do you think he stays at second for the rest of the year? Do they put him out in the outfield at times? What do you think about Kipnis this season?
Well, I would prefer him going to the outfield, but they need a reliable option and an improvement over him at second base. And right now, I don't know if that's on the roster. Maybe if Chang or one of these young guys can come up and really explode, then that's another story. But for the time being, I envision Kipnis at second base the majority of the year. Probably about 120 games I see him.
Yeah, another one of the big questions for the Indians has been their outfield, especially getting some power in the outfield. Let's not say at the beginning of the season. Let's say who is the starting lineup for the Indians outfield at the All-Star break? Eric, let's kick it off with you on this one.
Well, looking back at last year's injuries, I'm projecting them to be pretty close to healthy. So I'm going to go with Leonis Martin at center, Greg Allen at left, and Bradley Zimmer at right, I guess. I mean, I know Bradley played center. They're kind of moving things around. Maybe those positions might be shifting around, but I think those are the three starters. Tyler Naquin, I mean, he's just so inconsistent at the plate. I hope he can turn that around and become like a fourth to part-time starter in the outfield. After that, it's probably going to be have to shift maybe an infielder back there, or maybe Kipnis, maybe Santana. I really worried about any type of depth. God forbid an injury occurs for one of those three starters or Naquin even. But I feel pretty good about Leonis Martin. Granted, he only played a handful of games last year, but he was solid in what he played and what he showed with the team. Bradley, also had a pretty good year the last two seasons, but both campaigns ended in injury, and that's kind of worrisome. Greg Allen, one of the shorter guys, but he's really fast, can cover a lot of ground, and doesn't have a lot of power at the plate, but he can hit the ball and get on base. So, I really like some of the things these guys can do, but over 162 games, batting 4 or 5 times, and I'm just really worried.
Yeah, what do you think, Drew? Does Jake Bauers or Carlos Santana start in the outfield by All-Star break?
I certainly hope Carlos Santana's not out there. I mean, can you just imagine watching him track down a fly ball out in right field? That just has disaster written all over it. Bauers, maybe. I get sad when I talk about the Indians outfield. I'll quite frankly, this is a team that at one point had Albert Bell, Kenny Lofton, and Manny Ramirez all starting in the outfield, and today, we're over here hoping that that Greg Allen and Bradley Zimmer can keep Tyler Naquin on the bench because none of them are all that great. It's really rough. It is. I would love for one of these guys to show me that he belongs in the major leagues. That's where I'm at with this Indians outfield. I'd like for one of them to show me that he is an average outfielder for his position. And that means everything that goes along with it, offensively, defensively, whatever it is you're asked to do. Because I don't see it. I don't see one guy on this roster that approaches average for a major league outfielder, and that is eye-poppingly bad. That is like there's 3 positions, and not one of them. I personally don't think not one of those guys is what I would call an average level player, and that is hard to believe, but I think that is true today.
Yeah, hopefully we're forgetting Leonis Martin a little bit after his bacterial infection.
A little bit. That's the guy I'm hopeful for. Yeah.
He has a little bit of a comeback season.
Okay.
Life-threatening illness. He comes back. He's the strongest one. I don't know. I'm hoping Greg Allen, Bradley Zimmer can come back from injury. He had surgery last July, and the idea was it's going to be 8 to 12 months. So next July, or this upcoming July, is going to be just about 12 months. So he should definitely be back. Hopefully he can be out there. Hopefully the Indians, maybe Jake Bauers. I like the idea of that too. Hopefully we find some answers.
Hopefully find somebody, man. Somebody surprise me. Do something.
I saw a jump from year 1 to year 2 in Bradley Zimmer from quit swinging for every single pitch, swinging for the fences. But those 2 injuries have derailed his growth. So I'm not. He has it in him, but it's going to take a lot. So I'm not holding my breath, but I'd like to see something out of him.
All right, let's move from one of the Indians' weaknesses to their absolute strength. That's the starting rotation. And my question is, when healthy, do you think the Indians have the best starting lineup in baseball? Drew, let's kick it off with you.
Yes, I do. The Boston Red Sox give them a pretty good run, but I refuse to say anything positive about Boston sports. So we're going to move on. And once you do that, once you rule out discussing anybody, that other team, then I think it becomes pretty clear cut. The Astros have a very good rotation, but Verlander is going to be, is he 36? Is he 37?
36,
something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, he's still absolutely a top of the rotation ace. He's still an excellent pitcher. But I'd rather have Kluber, I think, at this point. Maybe not in the playoffs, but, you're talking about over the course of an entire season. I think Kluber is, at this point in their careers, I think he's the better player. And I think, Bauer and Carrasco and just top to bottom, that the Indians starting rotation, even down to all 5, Clevenger, everyone on that rotation, I don't think any team can match the top 3, and I'm very confident that no team can match the top 5 starters, that the Indians can throw out there.
Yeah, Eric, what do you think?
Chain's only as strong as their weakest link, and if the Indians' weakest links are Clevenger and Shane Bieber, I think we got a pretty strong chain. If those are going to be relied upon their 4th and 5th starters right now, and that's not including Danny Salazar, another guy I don't have a lot of expectations for, but if he finds his way in the starting lineup, those are 3 good options for 4, 5, for the 4th and 5th option, and potentially a 6th guy, and that's not even including the top 3. So you add those to the starting rotation. I mean, that's one hell of a starting lineup, and I'm glad the Indians have that, and they're going to keep them in a lot of contests.
Yeah, I was pretty amazed with all the focus on Bryce Harper and Manny Machado to see Dallas Keuchel of the Astros still a free agent. I think that's going to be tough if he does re-sign with the Astros. They might still have one of the strongest starting rotations. But another good note, even though they're in the National League, Dodgers, Clayton Kershaw might have an injury. That news has been making the rounds. So it's looking pretty good for the Indians. Hopefully everyone stays healthy and has a great season this year. So one other part of the rotation, speaking of how deep of a rotation we have, possibly the 6th starter, most likely is going to be Adam Plutko. He spent some time with the Indians last year. Where do you guys think he should end up? Should he stick around on the Indians in the Indians bullpen? Do you think he goes back down to the Clippers where he's had a lot of success? Eric, what do you think we do with Plutko?
Well, provided none of our starters have a blow-up type of season that Josh Tomlin had a year or 2 back, then I'm fine with keeping him in the pen. We got enough good arms starting, provided everybody's healthy, and let him work his way down the road a year or 2 into the starting rotation as some of these guys get older or get dealt for an outfielder or 2. I really like what I've seen from Plutko. He's got a lot of room to grow. I feel like I'm repeating myself multiple times, but you can say I have a lot of young guys in this team.
Deep farm system.
They're not inexperienced, young, have a lot of room to grow, have faith, but they have to prove it on the field. So, if they want to keep him down in Columbus for a couple of months, I totally understand, and then bring them up in emergency situations or double headers or they just want to take a couple starts off for person X, person Y. I totally understand, but in case of emergency, break the glass and throw them in for a reliever right now.
I like it, Drew. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is the Indians have to win a game in April, where what do you do with Plutko? Well, yeah, then he's in the bullpen because they don't have a whole lot in the bullpen, and he would be instantly one of their best arms. But that's not what I would personally like to see for him long term. He is a starting pitcher, and sure, just because they happen to have, we just talked about it, probably the best rotation in baseball. That doesn't mean that a guy who's always been a starting pitcher, who has prepared to be a starting pitcher, who enters spring training as a starting pitcher, that you suddenly shift his entire prep to become a reliever. So I would prefer to see him start the season in Columbus as a starting pitcher, get into the 5-man rotation they have in Columbus, do everything that is asked of a starting pitcher. And if he's needed, you bring him up. But I don't want this prospect moved to the bullpen just because the Indians don't have an answer in the bullpen right now. I think he is a starting pitcher, and that's what I'd like to see him continue to be.
All right, so if Pleco isn't in the bullpen, and let's say, so we love our starting lineup. They're going to go, on average, maybe 6 innings. You got Brad Hand. He's going to, close out the game. I'll save my puns for Eric here. But, all right, so those 2 extra innings, who are the Indians' best options? We get into the playoffs. We're going to have Brad Hand close it. Who are the Indians' pitch? Drew, let's kick it off with you here.
Yeah, so Eric actually stole a little bit of my thunder earlier. I love the idea of Danny Salazar in the bullpen. This is a guy that he can't stay healthy. He should be a starting pitcher, but there's no way that this man can stay healthy over the course here. He's proven it time and time again. But he can still, if you only ask him to throw an inning or two, he can still throw that fastball, up there with, I don't want to say the best of them, but he can still be a power type of a pitcher. And, he has good stuff. It's just he breaks down. And when you cut down on his innings, you transition him to the bullpen, I think he becomes one of the better options that they have. The other guy I like is John Edwards. He only had a 3.12 ERA. He is coming back from Tommy John. Sometimes those guys can come back and not miss a beat. Sometimes they really struggle. So it's a major question mark. But he's shown that he has the talent to do that. The other guy I like is Ben Taylor. Whenever I hear this name, I think of the bad linebacker for the early 2000 Browns with a bunch of those just terrible players. Anyway, he is not a terrible early turn of this century Browns linebacker. He had a 2.5 ERA. He had 11 saves and I think like 12 tries in Columbus. He's on their spring training roster now. I think he's somebody that you think about as an option because I don't think there's a whole lot better. Again, a young player, but it's somebody that I think can give you, a good quality inning. I hope anyway. He's shown it in AAA. We'll see about the majors.
Eric, who else do you have in the pen that's gonna?
2 guys that first came to mind are Adam Simber and Nick Wickren, the recently traded guy to the Indians. I think they're going to pitch the 7th and 8th and hand the ball to Brad. So that's going to be that was a Brad Hand pun, by the way. That went right over your guys' head.
Sorry.
No, I heard it. I just refuse to acknowledge it.
I mean, Simber was part of the trade with Hand. He's got that Brad Clontz sidewinder from the 90s. It's could be throwing hitters off. It kind of reminds me of the guy they just got rid of, who they brought back a couple years ago from the Blue Jays. I can't think of his name right now. But, I think those are going to be – what'd you say?
No, I'm just kidding. David Risky.
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
All right, we'll move on. But, those are my 2 other guys that I really have somewhat confidence in. Dan Otero, Nick Goody. I mean, they've been on the team for a couple years each, but they're both hit and miss.
I never want to see Dan Otero in there again.
He had a couple decent outings in the 2016 playoffs, but after that, it's been really brutal to watch. Maybe wild card would be Neil Ramirez. But other than that, I mean, Adam and Nick are my 2 top guys. Yeah. And then I also agree with the Salazar, but who knows where his arm's at or his shoulder and his head is for that matter.
Let's finish it off with the final promo and why why Cleveland fans should be watching the Indians this season. Is it going to compete with all that Browns offseason news? Why you should actually watch these games? Eric, give me your final promo.
Well, you get a chance to watch a good team. You're bridging the gap between this awful Cavs mess and a very exciting Browns team. But in the meantime, in the months of May and June, there's not a whole lot of Browns going on. The draft will have just wrapped up. It's going to be warm out. You're going to be excited. You're going to be, want to take the family out to the game. Tickets should be cheap. Warm weather. You get a hot dog and a beer. It might not be the most exciting brand of baseball, but it's something fun to do. And, looking forward to it.
Drew, why are you going to be watching?
Yeah, I'm going to be watching for 3 reasons: pitching, and pitching. So it's not going to be the most exciting Indians team that we've ever seen, that we've ever assembled. I was lucky enough to go to a couple games last year. In one of those games, it was right around July 4th. I think they hit like 5 home runs and scored 16 runs, and everybody was a winner. It was great. I don't expect to see things like that, and that's okay. They need to figure out a way to piece, 4 runs together and have that hold up. And again, that is not going to be the most exciting form of baseball, but they should be in almost every game. And when you have that, it can be exciting, towards the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. There can be some drama, and you might get to see something special when you have a close game in those late innings. Those can be some of the most memorable games that you go to. So that's why I'll be watching. I'll be watching to see dominant pitching, and I'll be watching to see close games, and I will be watching to curse at this offense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll throw in one more. Let's appreciate Jose Ramirez, appreciate Francisco Lindor. We've seen a couple of guys get signed to huge contracts, $260 million, $300 million, $325 million. I don't think the Indians are going to sign either of these guys to one of those contracts. They've got some years remaining and probably some arbitration to be done, but just appreciate these guys and that they're going to stick around with the Indians hopefully for a couple more years, and that we're going to have hopefully a couple more years of contention. So appreciate that before it's gone and we are in a heavy rebuild, just like the Cavs. So we'll kick off the season. We'll end our preview with that. Drew, Eric, thank you guys for joining. And
thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
We'll talk again next week.